Well, welcome to 101, the special interview with County Executive Ike Leggett. I'm Lorna Virgili, and thank you for joining us. Mr. Leggett, once again, thank you so much for being here with us today. And today we're going to talk about the county's proposed budget that has been adopted by the County Council. So we're going to take a look at different portions of it, and I'd like to start, if possible, with your reaction. It appears that the County Council has adopted about 98% of what you had proposed, correct?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank the citizens of Montgomery County for their input, for the collaboration, for the discussion, deliberations that we've had, their participation in the process. And also want to thank the County Council for its leadership in adopting a challenging budget for us, but I think it's the right budget for the right times. Ultimately, they adopted about 98% of what we recommended. There are some differences, but I think when you look at the totality of a $4.4 billion budget, and the differences are basically somewhere in the neighborhood of probably $25 to $30 million of a difference. I think that's pretty significant in terms of the collaboration that we've had in working toward a very challenging budget for the county.
Challenging in the sense that there was this gap that needed to be closed of approximately $300 million. When you say you work together and you're mostly happy, what in this budget is different that you proposed that you would have liked to see perhaps not there?
Well, let's start back, because you look at $300 million, it does not give the full picture. What we've closed over the last 5 years is $2.5 billion in budgetary gaps. That's a huge number. And why the $300 million becomes so significant at this point in time, it is because of the previous cuts and reductions that we've had, so that by the time you get to the 5th year, you've eliminated all of the, quote, low-hanging fruit. You've cut not only the fruit away, you've cut the limbs, and now you're actually cutting into the tree itself. And so that $300 million is a fairly significant number. People look at what we did last year, that is to close $1 billion gap, and assume that $300 million is 1/3 the challenge. It really was probably more important and more difficult for us to fill this gap. And how we fill it, I think, becomes a significant part of the challenge as well as the outcome. The differences, of course, that we've had, for example, I wanted to start the the health insurance and pension contributions a little bit sooner. I think that created a small gap that they had to fill. There are some other challenges throughout the budget. In other words, they shifted some items from column A to column B, but those things are basically within Montgomery County itself. But here are the most significant things that are in the budget that we agreed upon that I think are significant. First of all, an increase in our reserve to meet our targeted number, a sizable contribution in the OPEC funding, a sizable contribution, 10% of our capital funding that we provide with pay-go, a fairly huge change in our health care and pension benefit for our employees. Those are significant things in this budget, as well as approving a slight adjustment on the tax for real estate in the county as well. Those are the major things in the budget, but people tend to, I think, somewhat be distracted about the things that get the headlines, i.e. the challenges with labor, the challenges we saw with closing at probably a $30 million gap. But overall, the rest of the budget had areas that are probably far more significant than the challenges we had with dealing with the $30 million on pension and on health care coverage for our employees.
You mentioned a couple of things right now, employees, and you've said it repeatedly, the fact that county employees have sacrificed a whole lot during the last 4 years. And what is expected of them this time around for FY12 in the sense that they are going to be part of these budget cuts as well?
Well, let's back up. You know, when you have a budget of $4.4 billion, 80% of that entire budget goes to county employee, either compensation, wages, benefits, in some form or another, 80%. So you cannot resolve a $2.5 billion challenge, or this year a $300 million challenge, without in some form or fashion impacting county employees. And they've done a terrific job. We've asked them to do more with less. For example, we've eliminated almost 1,300 positions in county government now. That means that there are fewer people actually doing the work. And we've eliminated for the last 3 years now at least the cost of living adjustment for our employees, as well as furloughing employees last year. We didn't furlough employees this year, My objective was to have some structural long-term savings so that we would not get into these kinds of ups and downs that we've had with our budget. This is why the pension distribution challenges for us was something that I thought we had to address. This is why we needed to adjust as related to our health insurance costs, the premiums that we are paying as well as our employees. We need to significantly reduce that because those are a huge drain. But we cannot do that without the loyal dedication and support of so many people who work. But what I heard from county employees as I traveled, not just this year, but the last 2 years, going out and talking to them repeatedly, and many of them contacted me repeatedly throughout this process, they said to me, we want you to preserve as many jobs as possible. Do not impact us, because if we have to make adjustments in health care or pension, we would much prefer doing that rather than to actually lose a job, because once you lose a job in this economy, it is difficult to turn around. Now, if you look at the impacts of things that we provided, and there's been a great deal of speculation about that, the impacts in terms of the average employees across the board was far less than was projected. Certainly there's an impact. Any impact is something that you don't want to have. But when you look at what we provide and you compare that to neighboring jurisdictions, both in and out of the private sector, the package in Montgomery County, even with the adjustment that I suggested, placed us in a superior position compared to most other jurisdictions.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the labor agreement and negotiations, because it is a balancing act, trying to preserve jobs and at the same time sort of maintain compensations for employees. How did that go, and where does it stand today?
Well, it was a challenge, but it was not a challenge that started just recently. But now this is the third year. I'd said that I did not believe the county executive in these absolute times should be bound by an arbitrator agreement that in fact sort of tied the hands of the county executive. Now that's a pretty radical position that some may take and look at that, but it's something that was started really 3 years ago. It was not challenged to the full extent as it was this time. It was challenged this time by several of the labor unions. But I had taken the position that if you look at the county's charter and you look at the mission and the executive office itself and the challenges that we face, to have a county executive that was absolutely bound by, with no exception, by a labor arbitrator agreement clearly was not something that charter was intended to provide. And so I challenged that, and thus far the courts have agreed with my position that the county executive should not, in those circumstances, be bound by a labor arbitrated agreement, especially when so much of the county's financial future is at stake.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leggett. We're going to take a small break right now, and we will come back and continue this one-on-one interview with County Executive Ike Leggett. We're talking about the FY12 budget that has been recently adopted by County Council. We'll be right back. Welcome back to One-on-One, this interview with County Executive Ike Leggett. I'm Lorna Virgili, and we're going to continue following up on the conversation that we just left off regarding the agreements, the labor agreements. What were the major differences?
Yeah. Well, first of all, in the arbitrated process, the County Council ultimately has the final word, so they can look at any decision, any agreement, and look at it de novo, meaning that they could pass it, approve it, reject it. So there's always a process for which people can follow through, and that's with the County Council ultimately. But some of the differences, for example, I decided in the budget that for those in the defined benefit plan in the county government, that is, that you're guaranteed a certain benefit for your pension, that those people will have to pay 2% more. For those in defined contribution, that is, that you're contributing into the system, that the county would reduce its contribution from the 8% that we're now contributing down to 6%. And when you look at those numbers at 6% and you compare that around, that's a fairly competitive number. On the health side, there were a range of options. Clearly, if you take the most extreme position, that is a fairly large family, person who has the most expensive health plan going today, that person may pay a little bit more, probably $70, $80 or so per pay period. But if you go to the other plans, and there are gradations of plans they're in, you could go all the way down to an HMO, and you would actually get $45 back. So the idea that you would be subject to the most extreme plan that would be countywide for all employees simply was not true. There was a gradation of plans that you could accept in that many people have in other systems around the region.
Let's switch a little bit now to the school system. County Council proposed about a 25 million cut for MCPS for the public school system. Is that going to stand?
Well, I think so, because in my budget I provided an $82 million reduction and said that, you know, to go beyond that, it must be negotiated and dealt with the school system. But it was a tough call for the county council. They had a difference, and we can respectfully have differences about approaches here. And I think one of the differences, one of the challenges became when you move the start time back for the contributions from the pension system as well as the health care from July 1 to January 1, then you created essentially a $15+ million gap, and you had to fill that in some fashion. And so when you look at that compared to some of the other things that it had in the budget, it created probably about a $20–25 million difference. Now, my approach was different because, as you know, I submitted a budget that called for an $82 million reduction. I thought that number was a sufficient number, but to suggest that you could not go beyond that and would cause great harm to the school system, irreparable harm, or that would impact the classroom, those arguments I think need to be evaluated a little bit more carefully, because I still don't get quite to that point, although I think the school system makes a fairly good argument about the impacts that they see given the increase of 6,000 students. But keep in mind what we're talking about now. We're talking about a $2.2 billion budget in the school system, and you're essentially talking now a difference of about $25 million.
The council also mentioned the fact that they will not apply for the waiver of school maintenance effort. How would that impact the system in the fall?
Well, we're still evolving that. You know, we could in fact be subject to a penalty of $22 million. But the way the law is constructed, the way it is interpreted, really provide for some very unwise, unintended results. The result here that you can literally look at the statute and say that it's easier, better for the county to not apply for the waiver, accept the $22 million penalty, and still come out ahead, because it sort of reset the base from which you're going to start what the penalty should be for the future. That's a very, very unlikely circumstances of what was originally intended in terms of this law. This is why I've argued for a number of years that this law needs to be reevaluated and to start from scratch, because the law has a number of unintended consequences. But again, you could make a very strong argument that it was in the county's best interest not to even seek the waiver. My position was originally going in that we would seek the waiver as part of the budget submission that I provided. But again, these are arguments that you can have within the confines of the school system budget, within the county council and the county executive office. But it is not in any form or fashion, I think, a position that one cannot reasonably argue that you should go below that number, accept the penalty, and come out ahead, because the penalty is easier to accept rather than to readjust the overall foundation from which you start for the future.
These are challenging times, obviously. What would you say the school system is going to see welcoming a new superintendent for the new school year? What would you foresee his challenges being for a new superintendent that is going to have to face these budget cuts right off the bat?
Money, 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 and more money. That the system really now is challenged. We're challenged across the board. And it is important when you look at a system that continues to grow. There's 6,000 students added in the last couple of years, that you need additional resources. You can't simply go through this process not meeting maintenance of efforts. We don't want to be there. I want to make sure that we grow the system and grow the revenues from the system. We want to make certain that we pay our teachers a cost of living adjustment. We want to make certain that we have the step increases and the technology in the schools that we all want, and the leadership and the training that they need. A new superintendent coming in with these financial challenges today need to have the assurances that we are going to get back to regular order by restoring some of the things that we've lost in the last few years. But it's going to be a challenge and a transition for us. I am reasonably optimistic that the budget blueprints that we have today and the challenges that we see tomorrow, that unless there's a huge national challenge in terms of recession or something of that sort, or some unforeseen challenges at the state level that alters the budgetary outlook for Montgomery County, then we can get through this process. And I think next year it will be an easier task for us compared to what we've seen this year. And by that, we will continue to put ourselves in a best position, because we will have sustainable budgets going forward.
Property taxes. On your statement, that was released once the county council adopted your recommended budget, you state that regarding property taxes, approximately 84% of property owners in the county will actually see some sort of reduction on the property tax bill. How do we interpret that?
Well, because of the assessments. If you take a property that was worth, say, $500,000 2 years ago or 3 years ago, that house may be worth $450 or $440 today. And so if we wanted to get the same level of taxes, we had to adjust the rate. Just using as a round number, 5% of $500,000 will get you a certain amount of money, but as opposed to what 5% of $440. So in order to get the same amount of money for a house that's valued at $440, you adjust the rate so that rate becomes a little bit higher for you. So you pay essentially the same thing. Now, in many cases, the actual rate will go, the actual cost will go down because of the assessable value, but it depends on what cycle you're in. And there have been significant tax reduction based on the assessable base thus far.
Let's continue talking about property tax. When we come back, we're going to take a short break, but don't go away. We'll be back with County Executive Ike Leggett. Welcome back to 101 interview with County Executive Ike Leggett. I'm Lorna Virgili, and let's just follow up on this property tax issue. I'm a homeowner in Montgomery County as well, and it seems a little confusing to me, and I understand the assessed value has lowered, but if I'm on that third that hasn't been reassessed, what happens with me and how much I pay the county?
Well, one of the most difficult things we have, this is not just Montgomery County, but throughout the state of Maryland, that the taxes are reassessed every 3 years. Now, you do not pay the full value once your property is assessed the first time. There's a phase-in rate because the maximum that will increase will be 10%. So it is phased in over a period of time. Now, what happens, you may see in that period of time that your value of your home actually goes down, but you're not paying that value at that point in time. You're paying in the continuation of that phased in. So the next year that phased in may kick an additional 10%, where your actual value has gone down. But you really did not pay the appropriate tax bill the first time. You paid only a portion of the increase, and you continue to pay the other 2/3 of the increase over the next 2 years. However, the value of your house may go down. And so it depends on what phase, what period of time you're in, and when you're assessed. So you have this challenge at the time of trying to explain that to people. And it is a very difficult explanation. When your value sometimes goes down, and you're paying in the phase rate at the same time where your actual property bill goes up. It's a difficult concept for people to accept.
Well, let's just trust that we're going to pay less property taxes.
Most people.
Most people will. Yeah. All right, let's talk about Costco. The county council did approve, I believe, 50% of the funding necessary to attract them into the Wheaton area. And this was one of the hot topics, especially when you were going around the county doing your forums, your budget forums, especially in that area. You had a lot of residents in favor and a lot of residents against Costco coming in, especially the gas station and so forth. It's been approved. It's apparently the reality for the Wheaton area. And tell us what is the final plan regarding specifically the gas station.
Well, the gas station is going through a different process, and it will go through an appeals process, a Board of Appeals, to look at whether the gas station is appropriate for that area. So that's a different process altogether. So let's set that aside. And let's start with the initial concept here was to shore up a very sagging shopping center in Wheaton, that we have a large amount of space that's simply vacant. And so we need to try to help that. The county's contribution of $4 million over a 2-year period was only a small portion of a nearly $70 million that the shopping center would invest in order to attract Costco there. Now, what that will mean for that area, I think, will be additional jobs. It will show up the shopping center. It will increase the accessible base of the taxes and provide us with revenues long into the future. You know, there are several ways in which you can adjust and find ways in which to resolve budgetary challenges. You can simply bury your head in the sand and simply fund today and not look ahead for tomorrow. And you can get away with maybe an adjustment for 1 year. but it would do such irreparable harm to the county that you not invest for the future, that your children, grandchildren, and everyone else who looks for jobs here in the county, for economic development, for stability in resources that we have, it would be a very short order. So the challenge for me as a county executive is to make certain that we are financially sound today, but also make appropriate investments for the future. Now, people may challenge that, but if you look over the county historically, we have become a much better county because someone had the political will, the leadership and determination, not only to make certain that we respond to the budget challenges of today, but we also invested for the future. That way, we assured that this county will have a sustainable long-term growth. This was part of that. What we've done in Silver Spring was part of that. What we've done with the master plans and what we will do in the master plans for each county, what we've done in the new Science City, all of those are investments for the future. What we do in our school system are investments for the future. We cannot simply close our eyes to say we're going to only deal with today. We have to deal with today as well as tomorrow.
Yeah, one of the things I was mentioned during the town hall meetings was neighboring Silver Spring and the vision that leaders in the past had regarding that particular jurisdiction and what it is today.
And I was part of that leadership. I know what happened in Silver Spring. I know the investments we had. And there are many people who challenged that. Said, why are you making this investment in Silver Spring? Why are you providing the resources? Why are you putting all this much money into infrastructure? Simply leave Silver Spring alone and fund my immediate program today. Had we not done that, Silver Spring would have been a more of an economic drain and not provide the jobs, the development, and the growth to which the entire county now benefits as a result of that. Keep in mind, this is a relatively small amount for a long-term development for the future. It would increase our tax base, provide jobs at a relatively small cost of $4 million for the county. We simply have to look forward to the future, not look back.
Let's talk about secure communities. It's one of the topics that came up recently in the fact that Montgomery County will have to now participate, mandated by the federal government. Originally, Montgomery County had not welcomed secure communities, had not been part of that program. What's next steps?
Well, I'm not sure that I personally welcome it today. I think that we have very little choice today. The name secure community in and of itself, I think, is a misnomer because in many ways, the kinds of policies that we see and the result of that could make some of our communities insecure because it could put a breach between local law enforcement and the citizens who are in that area. Because if we want citizens to participate with us, we want community policing, we want to make sure that people trust and understand the role of the police and that every time that they're stopped for a traffic light or want to participate in some way by helping the police, that they are encouraged to do so. If they're not encouraged to do so, they feel intimidated and they not participate as we'd like for them to participate, then those communities are not going to be as secure as we think. We had a program in Montgomery County that I think worked very well for us. We certainly every week would send names of people in our detention center. And when we have major crimes, whoever committed the crime, regardless of the person, we would submit those crimes and those names, social security numbers directly to the federal authorities. That way we were targeting serious crimes and things that happened in the county without disrupting and without the kind of ill will created by the Secure Communities Project. I disagreed with that, but I'm the county executive. We have to institute the local portion of this federal mandate, and so we will do so. But it is not something that we welcome, not something that we thought would be in the best interest of our community.
And it will be instituted in the fall, the end of September, correct?
Right.
Right. Well, Mr. Leggett, thank you so much for joining us today. We're out of time once again. We never have enough time to converse. It's a lot of information, much going in Montgomery County. So thank you once again. And thank you for joining us on this one-on-one interview with Ike Leggett, Montgomery County Executive. I'm Lorna Virgili. Thank you for watching.